Hi guys. Okay, so this is our BFG pack that I was talking about. It's our dodecahedron puzzle and book project. So we're going to be actually reading through our story. I know that you're at home. Normally my instructions would be to put your name on it, make sure we don't get it lost. But kind of hard to do that when you're at home. Just make sure that you know where this is, okay? Because we're going to be using it every single day for the next couple weeks. All right, so a quick heads up of what this is. So these are our dodecahedron directions. This won't actually be that useful until the very end of filling out all of these projects, okay? We'll come back to this when we need it, but just to know it's in there. If you want to read it, you can. If not, we'll come back. All right, so starting our packet today, this is our dodecahedron circle number 1. It is over cause and effect, okay? This is going to be over chapters 1 and 2. If you ever get confused of which one we're on, it actually says down here in the light gray for what chapters each page goes to. But we're going to read chapters 1 and 2, and we're going to find the cause and the effect of what's going on in those chapters, okay? We also have this bottom part that says, in the arrow, write an event that happened in the story. In the effect box, draw what happens as a result. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and read those chapters 1 and 2 together. You guys should have a PDF version. I've actually got an in-person version. So this one looks kind of cool. But it's exactly the same, okay? So if you feel comfortable with it, go ahead and read along with me. Otherwise, let's go ahead and begin. All right, so chapter 1 says the witching hour. Sophie couldn't sleep. A brilliant moonbeam was slanting through a gap in the curtains. It was shining right on her pillow. The other children in the dormitory had been asleep for hours. Sophie closed her eyes and lay quite still. She tried very hard to doze off. It was no good. The moonbeam was like a silver blade slicing through the room on her face. The house was absolutely silent. No voices came up from downstairs. There was no footsteps on the floor above her. The window behind the curtain was wide open, but nobody was walking on the pavement outside. No cars went by on the street. Not the tiniest sound could be heard anywhere. Sophie had never known such a silence. Perhaps, she told herself, this is what was called the witching hour. The witching hour, somebody had once whispered to her, was a special moment in the middle of the night where every child and every grown-up was in a deep, deep sleep, and all the dark things came out from hiding and had the world to themselves. The moonbeam was brighter than ever on Sophie's pillow. She decided to get out of bed and close the gap in the curtains. She got punished if you were caught out of bed after lights out, even if you said you had to go to the lavatory bathroom. That was not accepted as an excuse, and they punished you just the same. But there was no one about now. Sophie was sure of that. She reached out for her glasses that lay on the chair beside her bed. They had steel rims and very thick lenses, and she could hardly see a thing without them. She put them on, then she slipped out of bed and tiptoed over to the window. When she reached the curtains, Sophie hesitated. She longed to duck underneath them and lean out of the window to see the world look like now, and that the witching hour was at hand. She listened again. Everywhere it was deadly still. The longing to look out became so strong that she couldn't resist it. Quickly, she ducked under the curtains and leaned out of the window. In the silvery moonlight, the village street she knew so well seemed completely different. The houses looked bent and crooked like houses in a fairy tale. Everything was pale and ghostly and milky white. Across the road, she could see Mrs. Wren's shop, where she bought buttons and wool and bits of elastic. It didn't look real. There was something dim and misty about that, too. Sophie allowed her eye to travel farther and farther down the street. Suddenly, she froze. There was something coming up the street on the opposite side. It was something black, something tall and black, something very tall and very black and very thin. Interesting. We'll have to see how this turns out. It wasn't a human. It couldn't be. It was 4 times as tall as the tallest human. It was so tall its head was higher than the upstairs windows of the houses. Sophie opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Her throat, like her whole body, was frozen with fright. This was the witching hour, all right. The tall black figure was coming her way. It was keeping very close to the houses across the street, hiding in the shadowy places where there was no moonlight. On and on it came, nearer and nearer, but it was moving in spurts. It would stop, then it would move on, then it would stop again. But what on earth was it doing? Aha! Sophie could see now what it was up to. It was stopping in front of each house. It would stop and peer into the upstairs windows of each house in the street. It actually had to bend down to peer into the upstairs windows. That's how tall it was. It would stop and peer in, then it would slide on to the next house and stop again and peer in, and so on along the street. It was much closer to now, and Sophie could see it much more clearly. Looking at it carefully, she decided it had to be some kind of person. Obviously, it was not human, but it was definitely a person. A giant person, perhaps. Sophie stared hard across the misty moonlit street. The giant, if that's what he was wearing a long black cloak. In one hand, he was holding what looked like a very long, thin trumpet. In the other hand, he held a large suitcase. The giant had stopped now right in front of Mr. and Mrs. Gooshy's house. The Gooshys had a greengrocer's shop in the middle of the high street, and the family lived above the shop. The 2 Gooshy children slept in the upstairs front room. Sophie knew that. The giant was peering through the window into the room where Michael and Jane Gooshy were sleeping. From across the street, Sophie watched and held her breath. Suspenseful. She saw the giant step back a pace and put the suitcase down on the pavement. He bent over and opened the suitcase. He took something out of it. It looked like a glass jar, one of those square ones with a screw top. He unscrewed the top of the jar and poured what was in it into the end of a long trumpet thing. Sophie watched, trembling. She saw the giant straighten up again and saw him poke the trumpet in through the open upstairs window of the room where the Gooshy children were sleeping. She saw the giant take a deep breath and woof! He blew through the trumpet. Oh, there we go. There's a picture of the giant kind of in shadow. He's got his long cloak here. And there's the upstairs room where the Gooshy children are. No noise came out, but it was obvious to Sophie that whatever had happened in the jar had now been blown through the trumpet into the Gooshy children's bedroom. What could it be? As the giant withdrew the trumpet from the window and bent down to pick up the suitcase, he happened to turn his head and glance across the street. In the moonlight, Sophie caught a glimpse of an enormous long, pale, wrinkly face with enormous ears. The nose was as sharp as a knife, and above the nose there were 2 bright, flashing eyes, and the eyes were staring straight at Sophie. There was a fierce and devilish look about them. Sophie gave a yelp and pulled back from the window. She flew across the dormitory and jumped into her bed and hid under the blanket. And there she crouched, still as a mouse, and tingling all over. Okay, so that's the end of chapter 2. So we read chapter 1 and 2. Now we got to go over the cause and effect. So, cause and effect, as you remember from a couple of weeks ago, is something that happens because something else occurred. Okay? So basically, if something happens, like if I were to throw a ball, right? If I threw a ball and then it bounced on the ground and bounced over to Ginger and Bailey, right? The cause of Ginger and Bailey getting the ball would be that I threw it, right? Because it bounced and it went over to them. The effect of me throwing the ball was to get to Ginger and Bailey. So the cause was I threw it. The effect was that they got it. Okay? In these chapters, we are talking about Sophie, right? That's our first character that we've been introduced to. And technically, we've been introduced to a second one, but I'm not going to give away who that is. But so far, Sophie had been in her little world, in her little bedroom, in her house, and she had been talking about the witching hour, right? She had said that the world had gone still and that this was indeed the witching hour. So if the world was still, right, that would have been the effect. But what would have caused everything to go still? Well, let's go ahead and add this on here, okay? So we're going to say this over here, the little arrows are going to be our cause, right? So cause on the arrows. And then our effects are going to be from these boxes. Okay? So we have cause and effect. Now, we said that Sophie was awake, right? It was, even though it was even the witching hour, it was dark, but what was shining on her face? So let's put the effect was that she woke up. So Sophie woke up in the middle of the night. Okay, so she woke up in the middle of the night, right? We can also put witching hour down here just to make sure that we remember what part of this was. But what was the cause? Well, remember that she was laying there and that it's still, all the world was quiet, but there was moonlight coming in through her curtains. So the cause here would be moonlight came through the curtains. Okay, so moonlight came through the curtains, and Sophie woke up in the middle of the night because of it. Okay, because the sunlight, if the moonlight comes through your curtains and like hits you in the eye, you're gonna wake up. It is kind of bright. Okay, so the cause was the moonlight came through the curtains. Sophie woke up in the middle of the night. All right, now that she's awake, and she is awake because of that moonlight, we got to figure out what else happens in the story. So that was our first chapter. She woke up, she went to go shut the curtains. As she was up to go shut the curtains, right? So the cause was she was up. We're doing this one backwards, I know. But the cause was she was up and she opened the curtains, or closed them a little bit more, right? But as she was there, so Sophie got up to close the curtains, right? Okay, so she got up to close the curtains. Pretty simple. Kind of follows along with the moonlight came through the curtains, so she woke up. So now she's going to go close them. But what happens when she went to go close the curtains? Well, she saw a mysterious figure, didn't she? Yeah, she saw the giant, or a giant figure. So we have to put into the effect here. So Sophie got up to close the curtains. She saw a giant. We're going to put quotes around it because she doesn't know if it's an actual giant yet. She saw a giant doing what? Well, putting something into the windows down the street. Okay, now I know that doesn't fit in my box, and that's okay, as long as it's within this giant pentagon, I really don't care if it's inside that itty bitty box. I know it's small, but at least if it's on the page. So our cause was here, our first one, was moonlight came through the curtains. Okay. Pretty common, pretty normal. The cause was, okay, light came in. The effect of that, so what happened because of that, was that Sophie woke up in the middle of the night during the witching hour. Okay. All right. The second cause that we have here, something else that happened, was that Sophie got up to close the curtains. Okay. So that is what she did. The effect of that, or what happened because of that, was that she saw a giant putting something into the windows down the street. Okay. So in our next few chapters, we're going to be seeing what it is that is actually happening with those and see what the effect of all of this is. All right, guys. Well, that is it for our chapters 1 and 2. If you have any questions, feel free to get a hold of me, as you know how to. Make sure that you are rereading the chapters if you get confused, to go and make sure you know where these are. Okay. Let me know if you need anything. And I'm so excited to be reading this book with you. I will see you next time. All right. Bye, guys.